Welcome to the Mindful Mama Movement podcast. I'm Shannon Kinney-Dew, creator of afreespiritlife.com.
And I'm Ashley Walburn, owner of Home Holistic. And together, we are bringing you the Mindful Mama Movement.
Mindful mothering is about nurturing your heart and soul while you nurture your children. It's about consciously awakening to your inner wisdom and being peacefully present as a mama, no matter where you are on your journey. From discovering your newborn to loving and accepting the wonderful people who've left your nest. Our movement is empowering mamas to be authentic and to live inspired lives. We are so happy you're here.
To be free, to feel free, to be free.
Hey everyone, it's Shannon, and I'm here to welcome you to episode 16 of the Mindful Mama Movement podcast. In today's show, we are talking to Sami Aaron. Sami is a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher who's been teaching contemplative, breathing, and restorative practices through yoga nidra, which is yoga sleep, and pranayama, which is yoga breathing. Following 2 years of leading workshops, she now is the Director of Training and Development for the Nature Process. The Nature Process concepts offer powerful tools to help manage stress, promote creative thinking, and improve your mental health by helping you release grief, to rethink your limiting beliefs, explore and expand goal-setting options, and help clarify most any concern or decision-making process by connecting deeply to the wisdom of the natural world. You will love this interview with Sami as she shares her own story of being a mother and walking through grief, how she has learned to heal and open her heart in new ways, and how she's inspiring others to do the same. It's a tender, vulnerable, wonderful show, and we're so happy to share her story with you. I know you're going to feel inspired. Enjoy and join our conversation, the Mindful Mama Movement group on Facebook. Sami will be joining us there this week. If you have specific questions about the nature process, about going through your own grief, share your stories, connect with our community. We are here for you. If you would like additional resources, you can check out our show notes at mindfulmamamovement.com. And just thank you. Thank you for being part of our community. Thank you for stopping by iTunes and subscribing to our show, for spreading the word about our movement. We appreciate you deeply, and we hope you enjoy the show.
So welcome to the Mindful Mama Movement podcast. Shannon and I are here today with Sami Aaron, and we would just like to welcome you to the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I've been lurking on the Facebook page for a really long time.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and what stage of motherhood you're in.
So I would be your oldest listener, I think. I'm 64, and I've been married for 44 years. We like to say we've been married for 25 years of bliss, and then there's all the rest of those years. I had two sons, and my younger son is a chef here in Kansas City. He's close to 40. I lost my older son about 13 years ago to suicide, and so my journey's been interesting as a mother. So as a mother of an almost 40-year-old, there's not a whole lot of mothering that he'll let me do. And sometimes I have to convince him that he needs my mothering. And he's always real gracious about it. Whether he always does what I tell him he needs to do or not is probably a whole different story. But he's, it's a very interesting, it's a different relationship with a real adult who has his own real career and his own real life. And it does change.
Does he call you? I'm curious, because my mom has two daughters and a son, and I just know sometimes she's always like, oh, he never calls. And as a mom of boys, I'm like, please, I hope they call when they're older.
Yeah, that was kind of our mission when the boys were teenagers. They were like 2.5 years apart, and some god-awful times when they were teenagers. And my goal, first of all, was to have us all still speaking when they graduated high school. And so he does call. It's interesting, though. He'll call his dad more about certain things, and he'll call me about other things. So there was just a local chef in Kansas City who passed away yesterday, and they were very close friends. And so any time that he has any nurturing support that he needs, he'll call me. But he'll also call me every time he goes to put his garden in at whatever restaurant he's working at, and he'll send me the snapshots of the plants that he plants. So it's good. It's different, though. And it's probably different than it would have been had we not lost his brother. So I think he nurtures me maybe a little more than he might have, as as a lot of sons might. So it's a little different.
Sami, will you share with us a little bit about your childbirth experience with your kids in the 70s?
Yeah. So in the mid-70s, it was pretty unusual for spouses or significant others to be able to attend people's births, to even be in the labor and delivery, the labor room, which is a separate room from the delivery room at the time. And there were people, husbands who were chaining themselves to their wives' labor beds so they wouldn't get kicked out of the room. And after when I went through labor and delivery with my first son and had just this amazing hippie experience, with no medications and a lot of breathing techniques and so on, I started teaching Lamaze classes, so childbirth classes based on a lot of breathing techniques, which the irony of that then is becoming a pranayama teacher 30 years later. But it was a really interesting experience. And so with my first child, this whole movement of women taking control and being the decision makers for their labor and delivery was just starting. Up until that time, when someone went into labor, someone took them to the hospital, dropped them off. The father stayed out in the waiting room with any other support family because nobody else was allowed in the rooms. And then someone came out hours or days later and said it's a girl or it's a boy. And so it was a whole different experience. And I was pretty proactive because I was taking these Lamaze classes, taking them as a student, and thought I had worked out a whole lot of things, like I wanted to be able to hold the baby right after birth, which was not part of this scenario back then. I wanted my husband to be able to stay with me in the hospital that we were at, allowed him to do that. But what I didn't know was during delivery, as I was pushing and I was laying on the delivery table and I was holding the hand grips, I didn't know that they had tied my hands down. And so I'm going to cry.
I'm going to cry. I know, I'm going to cry too.
We're here with you.
Oh my gosh, it's been 41 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it because they were Velcro strips. They were kind of soft, and they weren't tight. They were just my hand. So when he was born, of course, I was totally unmedicated. I was completely awake. And there's that intuitive response to reach down and grab that baby. And I freaked out. I mean, I just couldn't do it. And I'm like, what's happening? I can't move,
And was your husband there?
My husband was there.
Okay.
But he didn't know what was going on. And I was freaking out.
And you don't know what's wrong.
Nobody knew what was wrong because I didn't know why I couldn't lift my hands. There were sheets.
Right.
There were sheets on top of my hands, like I didn't know what the deal was. So anyway, I was able to hold him right away. I was able to keep him for 24 hours in the room. And back then we stayed in the hospital for 3 or 4 days. Well, 24 hours, they came into the room and the nurses said they were taking him into the nursery because the pediatrician, I forget the deal, but it was like the pediatrician didn't think the baby needed to be with the mother, the mother needed to get her rest and all that kind of thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I've had him for 24 hours and now you're telling me I can't have him till I'm ready to go home again? And how is that going to impact breastfeeding? And so I called the pediatrician on the phone and he said, well, I never gave those orders. He says, I don't care if you have the baby, if you want the baby in the room with you. So it was that kind of environment where there was zero communication and there was zero, not concern for the mother's welfare, but it was her physical, medical welfare was really all they were concerned with. And so I've been thinking how different that labor and delivery was from my next one. So 2.5 years later, switched hospitals, switched doctors, and my husband sat on the delivery table with his feet in the stirrups, and I leaned back against him as I gave birth. And my husband carried the baby from the delivery room into our final room. I mean, this was before there were birthing centers and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a whole different experience. But then this morning before this interview, I was thinking about stories my mother told. So this is having babies in the early 1950s. And when my mother was really nervous during her pregnancy, her doctor recommended that she start smoking, because having cigarettes would really help calm her down, and encouraged her to have at least a glass of wine every day while she was pregnant. And then some of the child rearing techniques, how they've changed. So my mother, so now we're going back 2 generations. When my mother was a baby, apparently she wanted to suck her thumb, which was not approved at the time. That was not a good thing. And they apparently make these like gloves or something that you put on the baby's hand to keep them from sucking their thumb. And I swear my mother has yet to find comfort in her life. She's in her 80s. And so I guess, part of what I thought I'd like to share is the concept that women giving birth today and their support group, so whether it's a significant other or spouse, family members, it's so vital to find that little bit of activism within yourself, to really tune into what your heart and your body are telling you. And for the most part, either ask for it, and if you're not given it, ask why not. And if you're still not given it, ask to talk to somebody else.
Yes.
And if you're still not given it and you feel like it's worth that fight, you need to find the way to be compassionate, literate, and knowledgeable about the subject. Find the way to be well-spoken from your heart. Because that's how, the first time I heard a guy that I was working with, his daughter was in labor, and he's on the phone with her all day while she's in labor, and she has a room full of people. All her friends are there with food and beverages while she's in labor, all in the same room. And I thought, oh my God, this has come 180 degrees from when we were giving birth. And I feel like it's because those of us who cared spoke our minds and spoke our hearts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I work with birthing women all the time, and we say to moms, I don't care what kind of childbirth experience it is that you want, but if you're informed and you have a feeling this feels right to me, we always say, ask yourself, what would my baby want? And that when you ask yourself, what would my baby want? And I still ask myself when I'm, getting ready to call my 22-year-old on a Friday night at midnight, like, would my baby want that? Maybe not. Maybe not. but truly, sometimes I still do. Like, sometimes I don't care what my baby wants. But in these moments that are so tricky, that it makes going to the NICU, if your baby needs to go, and continuing to touch your baby and remind everybody that only necessary voices in the room, or whatever it is that feels right to you, it's probably right. And also to say, is that my only choice? Is that my only option? That, when they're recommending a procedure, to say, do I have other options? And then you have 2 or 3 options and it's your choice. Yeah. And it does feel a lot different if your arms are being tied down, if it was your choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all I had to do was say, don't tie my arms down, but I didn't even know they were going to do it.
Right.
So that's a big part of it too. Like anytime there's a hospital tour, there's, anything you can do to really preemptively know the environment that you're walking into. Mm-hmm. It is well worth it. And take your support people with you because they're going to see and hear different things.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who struggled with self-doubt a big part of my life, I know that, my mission, what I'm passionate about is inspiring women to listen and learn how to listen to that intuition and to trust it. And I really believe that childbirth and then becoming a mom is a whole new level of learning how to trust that. And we've shared the story before about when I was about 35 weeks, I was not happy with my midwife. And that's when I started seeking out other help. And when Ashley and I really started connecting when I was in her class. And so I'm bringing that up to, it's never too late, whether you're still pregnant or you've already had your babies. There's only so much we can really investigate. I felt like I was so informed in my head, but what do you really know until you go through it? Right. And to be able to forgive yourself too, to say, I did what I could and and then to just really, as you said, to trust maybe this is the way your baby was supposed to come.
Oh, for sure.
This was supposed to be your experience for where it's led you now.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Well, let's just jump topics then.
Yes.
The silver lining coming from grief is so powerful. And it's something that you never imagine that you, would want to go through in order to have that learning. Yes. But you can't just read about someone else's grief. You can't just watch a movie about someone else's grief and get the same depth of understanding and the same depth of compassion. So I have a story actually in one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, Grieving and Recovery. And the title of the story is The Gift of Compassion. And it's the bottom line. So even if you say all the right things, you make all the right phone calls, you yada, 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 you do everything in your power, there's a whole bunch of stuff over which you have zero control. And sometimes to just simply step back from that and even to have compassion for yourself, for what you're going through, it can be so encouraging, I think. It can be, to visualize yourself as your own best friend. Yes. And how would you nurture yourself? How would you forgive yourself? How would you forgive your best friend or explain to your best friend, this was nothing you could do anything about? So you mentioned the NICU or, any kind of intervention. None of it's bad. That's a weird statement. None of it's bad because there's always this opportunity to grasp the depth of the physical pain and the emotional pain. And then what you have with that is the compassion that you can offer out to anybody else.
Yeah.
You always have that.
Yeah. I believe that my children had the childbirth experiences that they had. And my sister also, I was with my sister and she had a C-section really just because she wasn't progressing. And we both look back and say a lot like, I wish you would have been you. She says, I wish you would have been you 18 years ago. Yeah. Because she knows she would have had a different experience, but I wasn't. And for me, if I wouldn't have had those experiences, I wouldn't get to share those with all of you.
That's exactly right. And that's part of your personal growth is having gone through those experiences.
Yeah.
So you knew what to look for when you decided to really move into the doula role. It's like, I don't want anybody else to go through this. What can I learn or what reading can I do or what teacher can I study with or what can I just intuit for myself to just increase your own learning and your own gift that you have to give back. So yeah, when you're in the midst of that grief, nobody's going to tell you, oh, this is a good thing.
Right.
You know, there's
Right.
good stuff that's God's not going to give you any more than you can handle. Can I use the word bullshit on this?
Sure.
So that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? It may be true, but you don't ever want to hear that.
Can I tell you a great, just quick story? When I was my very first year doing therapy, I was working at a place in Kansas City called the Rehab Institute. So you came in with a terrible spinal cord injury or a terrible head injury. And so I was doing counseling with those people and their families. And this man who was a minister, and he just cried all the time, he had a spinal cord injury. He was helping someone whose car had been stalled on the highway. He had pulled over to help them, and another car went out and around and hit him, severed his spinal cord. And he really just cried all the time. But he said, I feel so regretful of saying that statement to so many people. So, of course, I said, tell me why. And he said, what I believe that statement really was meant to be is whatever happens, God will be with you, or your spiritual guides will be with you. But not because he's like, what has happened to me and to my family is too big.
Yeah.
This is more than we can handle, but I do know that, my God is beside me.
Yeah, and for me, I think my takeaway from that phrase is more, you are way stronger than you ever knew. Mm-hmm. You have such depth, whether it's spiritually, from whatever perspective, you have the opportunity when you're in the midst of that deep trauma or grief or whatever your situation is, to delve so deeply into it and find the strength to be able to uplift not just yourself, but everyone around you, whether you know it or not.
Amen.
Take us through that a little bit in your own story of how did you move through that grief and find your inner strength?
So I was 50 when my son died, and he had a very long story. He had left a suicide note about a year and a half prior to when he actually died. So he was in conventional therapy. He was on antidepressants. He was seeing a therapist as well as a psychiatrist, and then also a counselor. And he called me every single day during those days because that was the agreement. And it wasn't enough. There were these missing pieces, obviously. There was this missing piece, and we didn't know it at the time. We only knew what we were told to do, because this was something new to all of us. And the day after his funeral, one of the strange coincidences and synchronistic things that happened, someone took me to a yoga class. And it was my first yoga class, and there was just such power in it. It was a restorative yoga for seniors. So I was 50. I just made it in the class. And someone the teacher came up and had little rolled washcloths that she put underneath my wrist. So you're laying on the ground, your hands are palm face up, and this little washcloth under my wrist, and I just lost it. It was so nurturing.
Yes.
And so I started a yoga practice. I really, really delved into pranayama. So that was my Lamaze training. And
You've always been teaching breathing.
I've always been teaching breathing. And the pranayama really called to me because it was so intense and so powerful. So if I, in the midst of that grief, had just sat down to meditate, sat down to let my mind just float away, I'm going to call another bullshit, right? Wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
It couldn't have happened. I needed 27 things to think about
Yes.
in order to still some of those thoughts. And so in addition to the intellectual aspects of a formal, more of a classical pranayama practice, there's all the physical benefits, the breath, because when you're in grief, it's right there in your lungs. The shoulders roll forward. Your hands may go over your chest, and there is no breath. There's no opening, partly because when you're in deep grief, if you open, you're allowing yourself to experience more grief at some point. And so it's just so much easier to just keep it in for years, which I know I did, chose to. But the pranayama practice and then segueing into meditation were really the aspects of yoga that just helped me find some footing, helped me find, in the beginning, just momentary glimpses of stillness, and then over time, longer glimpses, and eventually experiences of stillness. And so I started teaching Heal Your Grieving Heart workshops. And then I found Yoga Nidra, which is deep guided yoga sleep. It's a conscious, you're kind of in this state between being awake and asleep, and it's a deep physical relaxation, visualization. There's a lot of breathing practices with it. It's a powerful practice that's been approved by the VA for treatment for PTSD. It's good for chronic pain. It's good for new ideas, goal setting. Like, it's not all negative stuff. But so I've taught a lot of Yoga Nidra, and just those practices were so powerful to move me into really the mindful state of everything's really okay, no matter how god-awful it is. So he's been gone, 13 and a half years. I still have times where I'm like, how can I feel that? The whole concept of how can I laugh and have a good time?
Yes.
When it's not just my son, but there's thousands of people who are suffering out there.
Yes.
And it's not just suicide. It's every addiction. It's every grief. It's every loss, right? How do you step back from your grief and say, the tulip trees are blooming, and when the sun shines through those purple and white blossoms, so you hear that on the breath, like that's joy breathing in. To be able to come to the place where you can allow that joy in is a really hard part of the journey. To not feel the guilt, to not feel like, well, who would I be as a human, as a mother, if I didn't have this grief with me every minute?
Yes.
And I actually had a chat with the meditation teacher, Adyashanti. Some of you may have either read his things. He's got some great, even free online videos and meditations. And his response was something along the lines of what I had mentioned earlier about finding the gift of compassion within that grief and being able to share it with others. And if you are still in the midst of that grief and you're still holding it, then you have nothing to share. So to be able to come to that level of peace at your own time, I know there's a lot of people in the audience that have lost babies or children or spouses, and don't let anybody tell you how long to grieve. You're going to grieve as long as your heart grieves, but know that you have the opportunity to take that grief and offer it to others by way of compassion.
It's powerful.
Oh, yeah.
It's really powerful. I'm so grateful. So many moms come here, reach out to us through our Facebook groups, that they're experiencing a loss and now pregnant with another baby, and I'm having a hard time connecting with this baby and now having guilt about that. Or experienced a loss and their marriage is suffering. And I think just what you said is, for me, what I heard is that when you have a moment that feels like, like a yummy moment, to savor it. Yeah. And then you'll recognize it more often the next time it happens, or when it's even a smaller moment that when you hear a song that you love, or see something that is beautiful, or have a deeply connected conversation, that those things will grow. Yeah.
Yeah. It's part of it, though, is you have to be at the stage where you're open enough and ready to allow those things come in, because I know for myself, it was as if all of my senses had just been on lockdown.
Yes.
And
how long do you feel like that period was for you?
It was like this.
Okay.
It was in waves.
Okay.
And so, it was god awful for about 6 months. And then one day, after a 3-day crying jag, I sat up in bed and said, I don't want to be this person anymore. And it was a conscious decision.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be this person. And plus I had my other son, I had my husband, I'm a pretty upbeat, positive person, and I didn't know what it would look like, but I made that decision one day. I don't want to be this nasty person, not nasty, miserable person. And so there would just be ups and downs, and there would be just a little trigger reminder of something that would like put you right back down, and then something beautiful that came up. And so to be able to say what length of time, it's really hard, because it's so unique, I think, for each person too.
I think it's good to hear, though, that it was up and down. Because even no matter if we haven't had that type of grief in our life, we still think, oh, I'm growing, I'm expanding, I'm getting, and then you get pushed back a little. And that kind of is the nature of growth anyways, right? Is to like, and then to sit back, and it's okay. I think what you said too, like being able to feel that joy, allowing yourself to feel that joy, but also allowing yourself to feel that deep grief.
Yeah.
Rather than just staying in one place. Eventually, it is a wave.
It is. And I know for me, the meditation practices, one of Adyashanti's methods is, he's in the Zen Buddhist tradition, is to do what they call an analytical meditation, where you literally can take a notepad and paper. For me, it was on my computer, where I would just have a thought, something I was just ruminating on, something I couldn't let go of, something that just needed to be worked out. And you just freeform it. You just keep allowing the words to come. How did this start? When did I first start thinking about this? What did everybody else say about it? What was my physical reaction, my emotional reaction? And you just, whatever thoughts come out about it, and at some point, and you're totally focused. So that's the meditative part. You come into, we'll talk about the nature process in a moment, but you come into this state of complete mindfulness, natural presence. Your entire being is in the moment of this issue that you're working on. And so you just freeform, and there is a moment where the kernel of truth smacks you in the face, and you go, oh, that's why I do that.
Yes.
That's why I can't. That's why they did that, right? And all of a sudden, then you're done with that topic.
Yes,
you're done with it.
Yes,
that topic that you could have been done with.
You didn't have to carry it for so long.
Myself. That there's stuff that we just put in our back pocket.
That's why journaling for me has been so powerful, because if you write something down, like it gives your all that mind stuff a place to go, and you dump it. But then you can't hide or forget about it. You look on that paper and maybe a year or two later or 10 years and you're like, I'm still writing about, it's so obvious. I wrote about it 10 years ago, even though I somehow forgot. Yeah. So it's, just getting it out, giving it a place to go. So it's not making you crazy.
It's powerful stuff.
It reminds me, we talked to Karen Mazin Miller in episode 8. She is a Zen Buddhist priest, and she is also a mother, but she talked about, so often we are given gifts in our life, but they're usually gifts we don't want. It's not like a spa. It's more like a humidifier. It's a gift that you need, but probably not something you would have asked for. And so just in your life now, what would you say is a gift that you've received that maybe wasn't one you asked for, but just something that has led you to where you are right now? Or what have you learned so far about yourself on your journey of being a mom?
Wow, there's a good question. An interesting gift about being a mom. I think what comes to me is the gift that my children are totally different from me. They came out different. One came out screaming and crying and kept that up for years. The other one came out, didn't say boo, didn't really want to breathe so much.
Yes.
He is just so friggin' mellow. And if you want to know anything, you really got to pump it out of him, right? And how they are not me. That was a really interesting gift. And I can remember the boys were maybe 8 and 10. And the neighborhood that we lived in had this really, really cool storm drainage area
that kids would love.
Oh my God, 8 and 10-year-old boys.
Uh-huh.
And what would happen is I remember the specific day in the summertime, they were gone. I didn't know where they went. I didn't know when they were coming home. I didn't know who they were with. They were just gone. And
that was the beauty of the 80s.
Wasn't it? Yeah, you can't do that now. Yeah.
Just come home for dinner.
Yeah.
Oh my dark.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have cell phones, first of all, right?
Get on your bike.
Yeah. And so I remember.
And where are we playing? Like, we were in creeks.
Oh,
and
heck yeah.
I mean, it was like so alleyways.
Oh my God. My hairdresser told me she and her sister went up in an airplane with this guy he was spraying crops, and then he said, "You guys want to go for a ride?" And they said, "Sure."
Just be home for dinner.
Yeah. Are you going to tell Mom? I don't know. I think we should.
No.
Anyway, so the kids are gone and I'm freaking out. It's starting to get dark out and I'm making my husband, well, go walk around and go find them. And he's like, "They're fine. They're boys." And he said, "This is no worse than he did." So he grew up in Pennsylvania in this little coal mining community. And he said, "It's not like they could go to the abandoned coal mines and smoke like we did." Don't tell me this. And
that's then what my head would go to.
Exactly.
Something equivalent of that.
Yeah. And I said, "But here's the deal. You deserve kids like that. I don't. I never did that kind of stuff.
Don't bring your karma into my karma."
Exactly. So that has always been a really interesting gift to see different perspectives from my own flesh and blood.
Yes.
Right. That's an interesting gift.
Thank you for sharing that. And it makes me think, your husband and you have different grieving processes?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yes.
So that is such a... So what happens, let's say you have a child that really needs you. The child's either sick or in an accident or struggling with something mentally, emotionally. You're both there to support the child, right? Mm-hmm. If one of you is ill, or one of the parents has a serious problem, the other spouse is there to support them. But when you both are in a place where your legs have just been cut off from underneath you, you don't know who you are, how you got there, and you have all your senses totally closed off. You don't give a shit what the other person's doing. And that's a really hard place to be with someone that you love. You have nothing within you to give to support them. And they are welcome to go do whatever they want to do to find their own support. So I know for myself, I'm not going to say it was easy. I was able to support my other son because I felt like I needed to. Did I support him as much as he needed me to? Probably not. So he was in his mid-20s. Mm-hmm. He had his support group. He hadn't been living at home for a long time. Neither of the boys had. But I found it within me to be able to support him when I thought he needed it. Mm-hmm. I had nothing within me to support my husband for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. And so when marriages break up, that's why. Some people, and this is from different support groups that I had been involved with, some people don't want a picture around of that child. They want no memories. Mm-hmm. Other people create shrines, right? Rooms where it has everything. Maybe they never changed the kid's bedroom or none of it's right or wrong. But when you're in a relationship,
Right.
it's really hard. And so we were able to have these conversations where we gave each other permission to be exactly who we were. So a lot of times he was very social and he needed to be out. I needed to never go anywhere and never see anybody again. So if we were invited somewhere, we gave ourselves permission to go in separate cars and with permission to leave whenever either of us wanted to leave.
Yes.
So if he wants to stay and close down the party or the event, that's fine because I'm out of here.
Yes.
So it was kind of finding that mid-road of acknowledging, knowing that underneath no feeling, there was really deep feeling and concern, you know, and kind of underneath that. And so coming from a place of compassion for each other, well, here's what I need, and compassion and truth. 100% truth is really, really hard in a relationship. It's really a hard thing. But finding that 100% truthfulness from your gut, it helped us weather probably 5 or 6 years worth, maybe even more.
I think it was that acceptance too. I think of like, you know, even in our own marriages, like we process joy differently or anything. And rather than wanting that person to do it your way, it's like just that allowing and really accepting and detaching. In essence, you can still be connected, but still allow that person to be who they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, different. Doing it different doesn't mean wrong.
Yes.
It's tricky.
Well, I want to hear about your nature processing.
Sure.
Tell us more.
So it's an actual registered trademark called the nature process. And most of my grieving and healing came from time I spent out in nature. I've always been an avid gardener. I mean, it was a big deal. My older son was, his undergrad degree was in environmental studies. And so he and I shared that deep, I mean, we just had to get out in nature. It was our thing. And so during the grieving process, I would just disappear, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and just go be on my own and spend a lot of time in nature. So about 2.5 years ago, I was connected to a Facebook group called Tree Sisters, TREE, treesisters.org. And the week I was connected to them, there was this woman, her name's Tabitha Jane, and she's in Scotland, and she had developed this program called the Nature Process. And it was a 6-week series, and all the entire cost was going to be donated to Tree Sisters, and their mission is to reforest Asia in the next 10 years. I mean, like, they are on a mission. So I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. So I take this course, and basically what Tabitha had done, she had lost her brother, her younger brother, in a car accident about a year after I lost my son. And her grieving process took place out in nature. And she found that the times when she felt the best, when she left nature, like she would take her grief out to somewhere, the woods or whatever, she had done certain things. So she was able to kind of step up from that and say, well, isn't that interesting? If I do these 5 things every time, I just have like this amazing energy grief release every single time. So she turned it into the nature process. So there's 5 steps. The first is you come into, well, you have like an idea or concept or a concern or worry that you want to take out to nature. And then you come into natural presence. So in natural presence, it just means you open all your senses. So this is from an eco-psychology perspective, which is the melding of ecology of the earth and psychology of the human. So I actually have a book coming out next year. It's this close. called Experience Your 54 Senses. So if you think you just have 5 senses, you would be mistaken. So you come into all of your senses. So a mindfulness place-based practice. The next step is natural body, where you do kind of a guided relaxation through the body, releasing any tension, any gripping, and you notice where in your body you're holding this issue or this topic that you are bringing to nature today. The next step is called natural attraction, and it's really just using the metaphors of some place you see in nature that is beautiful, that's alluring, that's interesting, and there's a metaphor there for you. It's just allowing yourself to see that metaphor and reflect it on yourself. And you come into natural communication, which is as if you could have a conversation with this place. How would that feel? What would it say to you? What would the moon say, for example, that it's just up there? It's not asking for anything. It doesn't try and make anything happen. It just reflects the light, and you realize it's even reflecting not even its own light. It's reflecting the light of the sun. Oh my gosh. And it's perfectly happy to just sit up there and shed light on the earth. And it's like, just my saying that, I'm feeling this kind of energy shift, right? And so you take whatever metaphors come to you in this state of communication, and what you notice is you have a different way of thinking. It's a whole different way. You get out of your head, basically, and you feel different thoughts and different ideas. And the last step is natural release, where literally you just feel the shift in the movement of where you're holding that in your body. And you know that the earth can handle it. It's been around for, I don't know, billions of years, right? And so it's an interesting, really interesting process.
So how do people participate in it?
Well, it's a new company. So Tabitha and I have been working about 2 years. There's a third woman, Lynn Mann, who's in the UK. And we just had our first facilitator training session this past, well, it's a 12-week series, and so it's just finishing today. Will be the last session of that. And starting next year, there will be a ton of 5-week webinars. We'll have some more training sessions. We have some cool concepts for how to offer this so that different not-for-profits can make money from it while their members receive the benefits of taking the classes. So what I guess I would encourage people to do, if they're interested in knowing more, they can go to thenatureprocess.co.
Okay.
Not .com, but
And
just
we'll leave that
.co.
in the show notes. It'll be
Okay,
easy
that'd be
for them to
great.
get.
Yeah.
And there's actually an online, if you sign up for the email list, I've recorded a 20-minute nature process session, which is a guided meditation, basically, that you get to download just by getting on the email
And when you
list.
say next year, because really we're recording before 2017, but you
this
mean
year,
in
2017.
Yes. Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. So my book will come out January. Tabitha has the second edition of her book. There is the Nature Process book on Amazon, but wait until probably early January. It'll say second edition.
Okay. And where do we find your book?
It'll be on Amazon also.
And so tell us the title again.
It's called Experience Your 54 Senses.
Okay,
And it's
so-
a nature process workbook.
I love it. Okay, so just as we're starting to wrap up our show, which we could go on forever, and we'll have you again. It's been wonderful. We know what the 5 senses are. Give us just like a tease. What are some of those other senses you're looking at?
Okay, look at whatever colors you're looking at. Notice the colors. Notice how many colors there are. Notice if any colors evoke a particular mood within you. Notice your breathing as you notice different colors. So that's just one of the senses. So we perceive through our eyes, but our eyes are just the receptacle for all these other senses. We can see direction, movement, motion. We can see depth and close. We can see shadows and shading and lighting. So all of our 5 senses are simply the receptacles. They're like the radios. You know, they don't know really what they receive particularly, but all these senses come into us. And so I kind of relate it to Crocodile Dundee from that movie. Those of you who've seen it, if you haven't seen it, it's just like a really corny movie from the 80s where he has these, like, you think they're superpowers, right? And he can tame 2 Rottweilers in New York City just by looking at them. And so one of your senses is the sense of the ability to mesmerize or hypnotize people. That's an actual ability that we humans have. Yeah. So, yeah, they're interesting. And on each page, I have a little snippet from nature of something in nature that represents that. So, for example, one of the senses is a sense of community. And within that community, a sense of joy and sorrow and sacrifice and compassion. So the little snippet in nature then is about the killdeer bird, which is a water bird, a shore bird, that when it wants to protect its young, or it thinks its young are being threatened, it'll pretend like it has a broken wing, and it'll try and lure whatever prey might be there by pretending it's injured, and hop on the ground to get, it's a cat or a fox or whatever, to get it away from the nest. And so this sense of sacrifice, even within the within wildlife. So it's fun. It's been a real fun book to write.
I can't wait to read it. And this is a process that you can share with your children too, right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You can share it with anybody. So this first group of facilitators who've gone through the training, 2 of them want to do it in schools. One wants to work with school counselors to teach it. One works in a hospital setting and wants to do it with hospital staff. It's all so powerful, and it cuts across every grief, every issue, every socioeconomic group. I mean, it can be used anywhere for anything. And it's a way of being completely in your body, recognizing and acknowledging what it's sensing and what it's telling you, and then knowing how to interpret that. So you were talking about that earlier, Ashley, with moms saying, well, what really feels right? When you have that openness to where you're totally aware of where in your body you're gripping or constricting, you know when something's right, and you know when something's not right. But it takes practice, because we don't practice that. We're not taught it.
Practice and trusting.
Yes.
That, I mean, big things in my life, and then some really little things that I look back on. One of my kids was injured in a canoeing accident, and I didn't want to go. And it was strong and overwhelming. We can't go. And in my mind, someone was saying all 6 of us in one boat, which wasn't realistic for a little canoe. But then he ended up having a big injury that day. And I knew we shouldn't have gone. And for me, through the years, that the more times it happens, I'm like, oh yeah, it was that same feeling. Or, oh, I have to go do this. And when I feel like, this is crazy, to be a prenatal yoga teacher. I just finished graduate school and had, I think, $50,000 in loans. And I told my husband, so I'm not really working or bringing in any income, but I have to go and do this thing. And I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, by the way. And we have a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old,
a lot of money. Yeah.
And thank God Will's like, all right, whatever. But I felt like I had to go. And so the more that we listen, I say a lot, like the universe is talking to you.
Intuition is one of your 54 senses.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I want you back we'll talk about intuition.
We'll just do 54 senses. Yeah.
Well, that just made me think about, okay, so we have a lot of busy moms listening who think, I don't have time. I don't have time to even take care of myself, let alone know how I feel or connect to my intuition. And I know that I was in that for, especially those younger years, you do tend to get kind of consumed by so much. Yes. Yeah. And one thing that did like really mentally save me is when I made that choice. And we live in a nature setting, and I had to get out and walk every day. And if I just made that, and then I'm okay, I miss it a little bit, or it snows, but it became this saving force for me just to get out and no music, no nothing, just me with the nature.
Yeah.
And that 20 minutes was all the difference. That was what I needed to kind of set myself to feel more grounded so I could do this.
Yep.
And so any last just tips for those moms who are really busy, feel they don't have time, how can they have a little moment to reconnect to nature?
Yeah. So first of all, what's really cool about this is to know that you don't have to be in a natural setting.
Mm-hmm.
You can be indoors. I highly recommend everybody get houseplants. I mean, those of you who know Ashley and have been to Home Holistic, Miss Gracie is in the corner. She's about a 6 foot tall Dieffenbachia.
I was told to ask you about her, by the way.
She's my love, and we have babies. She has babies. She's been with me 35 years. Not Gracie, but her mom.
Yes.
Get houseplants and eat. It doesn't matter what you're doing, because in every moment you have light and humidity and air, you have the temperature and the weather, you have your hearing, you have your sense of smell, you have your sense of taste, you have all your senses. And so in every moment, let's change a diaper. What is the scent of this baby's glorious face compared to the opposite end? What is the texture of the diaper material? What is the texture, you can look at every aspect and be in this moment and just open up and notice what your body's feeling and noticing through its senses. You don't have to even take that 20 minutes to go out to nature. Mm-hmm. Should you? Well, yeah. But you'll be able to do that, I swear, in 18 years. You can as much as your time as you want. But in the meantime, just notice what you notice right now, because being in that moment, A, it's precious. You know it's not going to last forever, right? And B, it just gives you a few moments to calm your breath, to still your mind, because you are focusing on that moment, focusing on the presence.
Is that what a mindful mama is to you?
Yeah, don't you think? Literally.
Yes.
Oh, good call.
Yeah.
She's good. Isn't she good?
Shannon's a mind reader. She knows everything.
I'm really
That's one of
connected
hers.
to my intuition.
Yeah. I think about, I'm busy. I have 4 kids, and Owen said this morning, "What job are you doing today?" Because I have like 5 jobs, and I said, "Oh, I'm podcasting today," and he was going through like all the things that I do, and I just like had a moment, and I like drank him in. And he's 12, and he's really like so scrumptious. I can't even take it because he's the baby, I think. But just like I memorized, like he just had on he's really tiny, his little tiny boxer shorts. That's all he had on this morning. He was sitting in front of like a little space heater.
Which I'm sure he loves that you're telling the world.
I won't let him listen to this part of it. He's the only one probably that wouldn't care. He'd be like, "That's what was happening." But just like, oh my God, he hasn't had a shower in a couple of days, like pre-Christmas showering, and
there's your sense of smell.
Yeah, yes. Wiry hair, but like, but for me, like,
if we draw it in. That's it. You draw in. It's as if you're breathing in. So one really quick thing you can do is find a tree or a plant. Either be next to it or be looking at it, or think about it, look at a picture on the wall, and visualize as you exhale, that tree needs your carbon dioxide. And it inhales your breath. And when it exhales, it's giving you oxygen. So it's like you getting this circular breath with the tree, with the plant. That's all you need to do. There's nothing else you need to do. And you can do that in every moment, whether it's your kid in his boxers who smells to high heavens. What a precious moment to just drink it in. Yeah.
Ah, that's a gift, and you're a gift. Thank you.
You guys are. I just think this is amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, we will share with everyone when the book is officially out, and I'm sure Sami wouldn't mind hopping in our Facebook group if you have any questions, and we'll let you know when that will happen. And yeah, just thank you. This has been wonderful. Thanks for listening. We have many more great shows for you coming your way. If you have just discovered us and you haven't listened to all of our great episodes before this one, go to mindfulmamamovement.com or find us on iTunes and check them out. There's some really good stuff in there and much more to come. Take care. Bye.
Your soul, follow